Javel, I have to hit record or you can hit record. Do you want me to hit record?
I did it.
You did it, okay. All right. I don't need to introduce Chris, but if anyone doesn't know him, this is Chris Knight.
Oh, I like it.
That's
Short, sweet, to the point. All right. Thank you, John. Thanks, co-hosts. Welcome, R1s. Welcome other people who somehow got sucked into this by mistake. What you're about to witness is a brief presentation that I would normally give during orientation, but because orientation was COVIDized this year, you didn't hear this then, so you're hearing it now. The good news is that this was originally scripted as about a 30 to 45 minute session, so I expect we're gonna finish reasonably early, but I've never done it in this format before, so who knows? So what I want to do is I want to spend about half of the time. The idea here is to sort of make you more comfortable with teaching, particularly third-year students, and B, make you more comfortable with grading third-year students. And we're going to spend about half the time on each one of those things. So we're going to spend the first half on teaching. And the way I want to open this up is to just have you guys, if Dr. Cho is ready, have y'all split up into breakout rooms of a few people, probably somewhere between 2 and 4, depending on the number that he picks. And I want you to discuss for about 3 minutes amongst yourselves characteristics of good teachers or coaches you've had in the past. So it doesn't have to be in a medical context. You're welcome to choose that. But the characteristics of people from whom you feel like you've learned the best and what it was about them and what they did that helped you learn. Are the instructions clear? Please post questions in the chat if you don't understand what I'm asking you to do. I'm watching.
Yep.
Okay.
We're going to be in groups of 3-ish. The group that's out of the VA is going to be larger, of course, because there's a larger group of you, but so it will be. Okay. So
and just so we're clear, when we come back, I'm going to ask you to put your ideas in the chat. I'm not going to go around to each group and ask you to chime in verbally, but I just want you to have a chance to talk amongst yourselves first. All right, John, pull the trigger.
Hi. I think I may have accidentally sent Chris somewhere.
Yeah. I think we all automatically went somewhere, and then
sorry, Chris. I think I sent you somewhere.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Do you want to, John? Do you want to try using Jamboard, or have you done it? Have you ever done Jamboard before?
I have no idea what that is.
Okay, then I'm not going to make you do it.
What is it?
It's basically just an online whiteboard that Google sponsors, and I find to be easier to use than I think it's easier to use than the Zoom whiteboard.
Yeah. Is that, what do you do then? Share a screen, or how do you do Jamboard? Is everyone logged in?
You can just share it. You can have everyone log in, but for this many people, it's a huge pain. The reason why it's nice is because because you're sharing through Google in real time, you can have your chat buddy filling the Jamboard while you're sharing it, so you can collaborate on the Jamboard. Let me play with the whiteboard for a second here.
No, I don't know about it, but I'm going to look into it because it sounds awesome.
John, you're going to have to send someone to a breakout room.
Okay. How do I do that? Do I do it through the...
It should be in the participants.
Yeah, I got it. I got it there. Hang on. Move to group 3. Okay. All right. You're gone. Such
magic.
Power.
Poof.
I was working home yesterday because I had the morning scratchy throat thing. Got COVID tested, and fortunately I'm COVID negative. But boy, it's my 3rd or 4th time that I've had it, and it doesn't get easier each time.
My husband had the exact same thing actually on Tuesday. He was supposed to go to see his PCP, went in, they were asking him a question, and he was like, oh, my throat's kind of scratchy. And they're like, get out, go, you can't be seen. And then he went and had a COVID test, and luckily it's negative.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah. But yeah, so and now I'm totally hopped up on Zyrtec, so if I'm not making any sense, that's why.
I didn't even know you could get hopped up on Zyrtec.
Enough of it, you can.
This is the same stuff that the allergists are like, oh yeah, take 20 BID. How are we doing for time, John? Do we need to bring him back? Or did you set a timer automatically?
I didn't set a timer. Why don't we bring him back? That's probably enough time, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. My daughter's taking a standardized test as part of, they do this standardized test thing as part of their thing, and once a year, and it happens to be around now, and everyone has to do it from home. And so this morning's class session is about like checking technical specifications and making sure they can connect. There they are.
Here they're coming back. Yeah, you're taking me back to the whole ABIM pre-exam thing for their home thing.
Yeah, not easy. I think that should be everyone.
Man, where are you?
Which one of us are we talking to?
Roxanne, it's got to be Roxanne's beach there.
Oh yeah, I've seen Roxanne's beach before.
It's Cabo. It's Cabo
I
San
wish.
Lucas. I know, I miss it.
All right, Mac, you just volunteered. What do you got?
Yeah, I guess I do that to myself a lot, don't I? So we talked about good teachers make learning more collaborative, so that even questions that are a bit more simple or we feel self-conscious about are easier to talk about. And then also people who understand how to like create momentum in a learner and then keep it going and then remain hands off so that somebody can learn independently but with a safety net.
Cool. Like I said, y'all are welcome to post in the chat. I don't want to have to go around and just call on people randomly all day. I'm happy to call on Roxanne next because she's in Cabo.
Yeah, we talked about someone who's kind. I always love it when a teacher starts by telling me, that's a great question. I'm like, okay, I don't feel as silly for asking that. And at least within internal medicine, both Thomas and I really love it when teachers kind of have a pre-formed framework of like how to say, oh yeah, when I think of syncope, this is how I think about it. And that just makes it really, really helpful.
Okay. Is everyone finger shy? Oh, there we go. Laura's summarizing her entire room. Okay, respectful to learners, not discouraging. So kind of on the same theme as kindness. Okay. Willing to spend time. I like that.
I had Dr. Erin.
No, go ahead. Talk.
I had Dr. Erin Cross from pulmonology when I was in med school, and I thought she was really, I learned a lot from her. And I think what I appreciated is she started out the rotation by sort of getting to know us and what we were interested in. So she was able to sort of tailor a lot of her teaching to where we were wanting to go throughout the rotation.
Laura, can you speak briefly to adaptive to different learning styles? Or have whoever brought that up say something.
Okay. I'm in place for Laura right now. I'm Kevin. We basically talked about how we all sort of like different types of learning. Like some of us like to be like really questioned to find different knowledge gaps, and like and moments when you're wrong are actually times of like pretty significant learning and can be memorable, while others don't necessarily like find it stressful or anxiety inducing to be questioned in that way. So just being adaptive to the different styles of learning that you encounter.
Interesting. So it's kind of like Socrates works for some people, but some people find that style intimidating.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Oh, Lauren, that's an interesting comment. Tell me more about bringing out the quiet people.
Yeah, I just think in a lot of group learning situations, it's very tempting for someone to have open-ended questions and wait for responses, which is great sometimes, but often can lend to like people who are more comfortable speaking or like sharing first. But I think a lot of times in smaller group situations, if you can create a comfortable learning environment where you don't feel like you're like picking on or pimping, I hate that word, someone, but you're like actually wanting to hear from everyone in the group, so that like not just one person's voice is being shared.
Okay. I love the way you guys are upvoting things and I can't even tell what you're upvoting. John, thank you for going meta on me, man. Let's see, what else? I'm gonna scroll back here. Kim, I like your comment about exploring what you know. I feel like that kind of ties back into it's interesting because we clearly have some people who are saying that so we're advocating kind of probing and exploring what you know, but making a learning environment that is safe enough that you can do that without feeling threatened. Okay, I like that. Does anyone have anything else to add? Because your next task is going to be to do the same thing and think about experiences. You can think about people if you want, but I would rather not have you focus on like bad teachers. I would rather have you focus on bad experiences. So what happened that made for suboptimal teaching environments for y'all? But before we go there, I want to give people a chance. If there's anyone who wants to throw in anything that hasn't been said, then please feel free.
I wanted to just add to what Kim mentioned. I think that like a lot of times like the difference between like telling and teaching is that like you as a teacher are kind of probing to see is who I'm talking to like getting what I'm saying, and that like kind of requires you to like probe into kind of non-verbally to see like, oh, are they just nodding along, or like do they actually get it? And I've totally been on like the receiving end where I felt like intimidated to actually say, wait, I don't understand at all what you're saying. And so I've just been like, oh yeah, totally, I get it. So I think it requires that kind of like level of kind of awareness of who are you talking to, which really makes all the difference when you're trying to communicate a teaching point.
Okay, so I'm hearing almost two different kinds of probing there, Shiv. I'm hearing the probing like identifying your learner, where is your learner starting from? So kind of figuring out where do you start your teaching, but you're actually talking about a different kind of probing, which is, did the message carry through? Was what I said understood? So those are great, both great times that you kind of assess your learner, you know, what do they already know, and did my message get across? I like it. Anything more? Okay. John, can you send them, you'll be in different, I'm pretty sure you'll be in different breakout rooms except for the VA, obviously, because Zoom just does that. But can you send them back out for another 3-minute chat as to kind of what is problematic, what makes for a difficult learning environment for you?
Yep, it's possible that you may be in the same room, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Chris, I think I'm going to launch you by accident. Sorry. Settings.
I did it's actually I don't know if you knew this, but on a Mac you actually have to install an extra component. So I'm actually really glad you sent me that, because when I tested it, it was like, oh yeah, please quit the app that you want to share audio from so I can install this extra component. It's like, I'm glad I didn't do that in real time.
Yeah, that would have been interesting. I did not know that. That's good to know in case someone is going from a Mac.
Yeah, I mean, it falls under the general heading of always test your tech, you know?
For sure. Well, that should be, let's see, is everyone back here? Looks like most people are back.
Okay, all right, people, don't make me pick on Mac again. Who wants to share something that they feel impeded learning or is a behavior they would not want to emulate as a teacher? It's just all sunshine and light.
I think something that was sometimes seems like it's a good idea but doesn't work all the time is when someone shares how they would have done something. I think it's helpful in certain scenarios, but sometimes when someone is telling you how they would do something and that's just not really going to work for you, like how they presented a patient or how their thought process on something, it's more helpful for them to sort of look at how you did it and figure out
how you can make it better the way your brain works, instead of just saying, this is how I do it, so you should do it this way as well.
So it's kind of it's like that old teach someone to fish
Yeah.
thing. It's sort of the equivalent of like just handing them a fish rather than getting any insight into how they would get the fish. Okay, I like that. We have really busy, too busy, don't have time to focus, and unapproachable teacher. Okay, wrong level for learner. Those all make intuitive sense. I don't think we need to go into those. Lauren, I am assuming that those are just like bad circumstances. So like these are not the right times to be teaching. Is that what that means?
Yes.
Okay. What else you got?
Kind of along the same lines of like teach a person to fish. Our group talked about when somebody gives a really short answer to a complicated question, or like doesn't provide the rationale behind what they're telling you. Like, great, we know what to do maybe, but in terms of retention, it's just always going to be better if we understand what's going on and why.
Yeah, and it's interesting because what you just framed in the negative context is almost more of a positive thing of you really want someone who illustrates their thought process. So failure to do that makes it much harder to learn from them. So I like that. I think I'm going to file it in my brain under something that you can do positively, which is to walk people through your thought process. What am I getting in the chat? Just telling someone information, not causing people to think deeply. So yeah, we're getting kind of a lot of not from the previous page. Okay. Sending a lot of papers via email as what? That's not teaching? Oh, damn. Oh, man. So much for the paper I was going to email y'all. Poor awareness of time management. Okay, so basically, I think that that goes along with Lauren's 30-minute lectures. Although you can probably do something more useful than lecture for 30 minutes, at least I hope so, because it's been almost that long already. All right, what else you got? Oops, that's not where I meant to type that. My bad. I just upvoted Mac though.
I think something for me that, I don't know if other people feel this way, but it's like sometimes it's either being pushed too far out of your comfort zone or not being pushed far enough out of your comfort zone. It's kind of like achieving that right balance between making you like slightly on edge, like a little bit out of your comfort zone, so you're like primed to kind of like think deeply, but not so far that you're like really stressed out.
Okay. Again, that is an affirmative framed as a negative. It sounds like the thing that you would do right is to find the limit where someone's in that space where they are comfortable enough to learn but challenged enough to have something to learn. Got it. Okay.
I think building off of that too, like I think we've all had moments where we're kind of spiraling out of control when something's not going well.
Speak for yourself, man.
Fumbling. And I was talking about this with Megan, like I feel like there are some attendings who just, or like seniors who just like their default, they haven't like maybe thought about how to like, or debriefed ahead of time how to handle moments like those, because we all have them. And so then they actually make it worse by like maybe like intensely probing or like doing these things to try to get you back on track. And it's hard because everybody's different, but yeah, I'm not sure what to do like when the dumpster is like fully engulfed with flames all the time.
And that actually happens to all of us. So those of you who tuned back in early were probably overheard me and John talking about whether or not the video that I'm going to try and show you guys in like 3 minutes is actually going to work. But yes, we all have our teaching dumpster fires. But I think to your point, Mac, you are correct that probably the more skilled teachers are better able to manage those dumpster fires with poise, or at least model how to manage those dumpster fires with poise rather than just continuing to talk as the flames burn around them. So yeah, I like that. Anyone want to add anything else before you, because I'm perfectly happy to postpone this video as long as y'all want. I don't know if it's going to work or not. Going once, going twice. Okay, nobody can save me from the video. All right, so before we get to the video, I just want to share really quickly my compilation of what you have told me. So let's share screen and pick this pretty screen here. So when we were talking about the positive stuff, I kind of put your ideas into two clusters. The yellow cluster on the left is more about content. And honestly, this probably belongs over here, so I'm just going to move it. So this is more about kind of what you know and how you approach your content. Exploring where the learners are, exploring what the learners know, being brief, being organized, frameworks for common questions. One tip I will give you for frameworks for common questions, and you're over on the left, I'll put you back in the middle, that's better, is what a lot of good teachers do is teach to your own strengths. So it's not a question of being so smart that you have a framework for everything. It's a question of finding, it's an issue of finding the question that you can speak to most effectively. And I encourage all of you as teachers to do that. That doesn't mean you don't answer the question that's asked. Obviously you answer the question that's asked, but when you loop back, you either have filled your knowledge gap so that you feel comfortable teaching that, or you teach something that you feel comfortable teaching. You do not have to know everything to be a good teacher. You just have to know what you have to teach at the moment. And if you don't feel comfortable teaching it on the fly, don't. Learn about it, come back to it later. This other cluster that is mostly blue, except for the one that I put in yellow because it came in late, is really about how do you maintain a good learning environment? How do you create a space where people are sufficiently comfortable to where they, A, don't feel threatened, B, feel comfortable sharing their own limitations with you because you can't meet them where they are if they don't show you, and C, feel safe being wrong, while simultaneously making it challenging enough that people actually learn stuff. Because if it's too cuddly or if it's you aim too low, then people are just, they're gonna learn, they're not gonna learn much, and they might not tell you because they don't want you to feel bad because you're so nice. So kind of creating that space where you're both kind and understanding and challenging is another key element of teaching. Going to the bad board, things that we have here: managing your time poorly, being obviously too busy. And the thing that I would tell you about being obviously too busy is one of the secrets about not teaching when you're too busy is don't teach when you're too busy. If you don't want to send learners the message that you don't have time for them, then what you do is you tell them, I would love to come back to that. Right now I have to take care of X, Y, Z, but we're going to come back to that. It's far better to do that than it is to be like, okay, I'm going to give you a 5-minute talk while I'm in the middle of discharging this person. Multitasking in teaching doesn't actually work super well. And even if you're doing like teaching on word rounds, it's worth kind of, as you are making your teaching point, you want to slightly disengage from patient care, focus on the teaching point, come back to the patient care. It's really hard to maintain both of those cognitive spaces at once. Unapproachable, which I'm hoping isn't a problem for anyone, but that's something that certainly I have been told that I am intimidating. I got over it. But it's feedback that is worth paying attention to. And then obviously bad timing, like I think it was Lauren who said that, you know, popping in at 8 in the morning and expecting people to attend to your teaching when they have other things that they have to worry about. So all that stuff, not having any thought process behind your teaching, all avoidable. Why did I do this? I did this because I wanted to make the point that you all have a mental model of a good teacher that has been built around people and experiences that you've had. You're going to get a full day workshop as R2s that goes into lots of different teaching techniques. My point is that to do the teaching that you're doing this year, you don't need to have a ton of workshops. You don't need to have a ton of extra teaching techniques. Just follow the skills that you already know, because you have just told me the core elements. And when we do the resident as teacher and leader workshop, we're going to hit all this stuff again, because these are the core elements of being a good teacher. Create a safe learning environment, challenge your learners, but not too much. Know what the hell you're talking about and time it appropriately. You're 90% of the way there. So that is your spiel, put onto little sticky notes by me on how to be a good teacher. Now I get to move on to grading. So that requires me to switch to this screen share. Stop that. Admit Nikki, why does she keep coming and going? And let's see if we can do this. Okay. Okay, I think I am sharing, it looks to me like I'm sharing the slides. John, not if I'm correct. Okay, now comes the big question. Are you going to see the video? So if this works, you are about to watch a brief video of a third-year student presenting to his attending with the resident alongside. And the focus that the question that I'm going to ask you after this video is basically, what grade do you think this student should get? So that's what I want you that's where I want your headspace to be while you're watching the video. So see if this works.
So this is Mr. Duncan, the patient you admitted with the night court resident?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Jane, have you had a chance to examine him yet? No, no. Okay, Rob, why don't you tell us a little bit about him?
Okay. Mr. Duncan is a 64-year-old gentleman presented to the ER yesterday complaining of shortness of breath. He has a history of hypertension and was diagnosed with CHF about 8 months ago. At that time, he had an echo which showed an EF of about 35% and a cath which showed some non-obstructive CAD. He had a full workup and they felt his CHF was due to longstanding hypertension. He was treated with metoprolol and lisinopril and furosemide and was doing well until the past month. For the past month, he's noticed worsening shortness of breath, particularly when he exerts himself. He hasn't had any chest pain, chills, or fevers, and hasn't felt sick. He claims to be taking his medications.
I take everything my doctor tells me to.
Yeah, so he's been compliant with his meds and diet, but now he's getting more short of breath. He does say it's worse.
Sound just cut out, Chris. Chris, you're on mute.
Ironically, I unmuted myself to try and turn up the video. Okay, let's go back here. And I'm going to fast forward to about where we were.
Chest pain. His past medical history is significant for OA and CHF, and he had a cholecystectomy in his 50s. Meds include Lasix 40 milligrams once a day, lisinopril 20 milligrams once a day, metoprolol 50 milligrams twice a day, and he's also been taking ibuprofen since his OA started acting up, and he takes quinine for leg cramps. On physical, vitals were temp 97.2, pulse 84, respiratory rate of 14, and his blood pressure was 124/7.
Sound just cut again.
I think when I mute myself, it mutes him.
His lungs had crackles at the bases bilaterally, but were otherwise clear without dullness to percussion. On cardiac exam, he had a normal S1 and S2, no murmurs, and I didn't appreciate an S3. His abdominal exam was normal, and he had no tenderness or rebound. He had bilateral lower extremity edema, 1+ to mid-shin. He also had typical OA changes in the hands, with Heberdine's nodes at his DIP joints, but the rest of his exam was completely normal. I did do a rectal, and there were no masses, and his stool was brown, but was guaiac positive.
Go on.
His ECG showed normal sinus rhythm at 88 beats per minute with occasional PACs, and he also had some ST and T wave changes laterally, but these were stable compared to an old ECG. Chest X-ray looked like CHF as per the ER attendant. They did a set of cardiac enzymes, and his CPK and troponin were normal. Electrolytes were sodium 137, potassium 3.9, chloride 104, and CO2 of 26. His BUN was 22, and his creatinine was 1.2. Glucose was 118. His admission hemoglobin was 7.2 with a hematocrit of 25. White count was 7.8 with a normal differential, and his platelets were 480,000. His MCV was 79.
Do you have a baseline hematocrit?
His hematocrit was 38 2 months ago, and that was the last time it was checked.
Okay. So what do you think is going on?
Sounds like he's bleeding from his GI tract. We got a retic count, and it was elevated at 3.7, so that confirms recent blood loss.
Okay. What would be the most likely causes of GI blood loss in this patient?
I'd say hemorrhoids are most likely, but colon cancer is also a possibility.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to rule out as a cause of this new anemia?
No, but we may need to consider other things if his scope is negative.
Okay, well, why don't we talk about an approach to anemia?
Okay, now for my next trick. Let's see. how do I think I see what I'm doing wrong. Jabel, I'm trying to pull the right question here, sorry, I'm just in the wrong space. Here we go. Okay. First question for y'all. How long was that? So it was a little bit of a cheat because I left the time bar down at the bottom of the screen. You were correct that it was 3 to 4 minutes, although that was actually the entire video, and his presentation was closer to 2 to 3 minutes. The reason why I put this question up there is if you don't have that time bar to pay attention to, it feels like he's going on forever. So the major point that I wanted to make with this is if you are going to hold students accountable for the time length of their presentation, which I actually encourage you not to do unless you have to, because it's really about content. It's not about how quickly or how slowly they go. But please, if you are going to hold students to a certain time, use your watch because it feels so much longer than it actually is. Okay, next question, which was the question that I promised you, is on to poll 7. How would you grade this student? These are your grading options. Okay, 70% of you have voted. That looks like all I'm going to get. And it's on the bubble. He gets a high pass, but just barely. So if he does well enough on the test, he'll probably bump himself up to honors. Cool. All right. So let's go through a little bit about like the theory of how I would like you to think about grading the student, and then we'll come back to him. So as many of you hopefully know, and those of you who aren't from here have hopefully heard at some point, the system that we use to grade here is called PRIME. P is for professionalism. RIME is historically for reporter, interpreter, manager, educator, and some of you may have come from medical schools where it means that. We have actually changed the E to enhanced communicator, which I will explain when I get to that point. But I want to explain the kind of the concept of how PRIME works and how we want you to use it. So we think of professionalism as being basically foundational. So when you think about what are you looking for? You know, compassion, respect for patients. Can you trust what the student is telling you is kind of one of the big things. Is their data valid? We want people who don't make things up. We want people who admit if they didn't do something, if they didn't do something on exam, if they didn't collect a lab point, they tell you that they didn't do it rather than they just kind of pull it from somewhere. Other things to think about, altruism, integrity, scholarship. For most students, it's really responsibility, integrity, respect, and compassion. There are plenty who are altruistic, but it's a little harder to model that in like a ward medicine setting. And I'm not asking you to assess students on scholarship, although educational attitudes obviously matter. But that's kind of like the groundwork of professionalism. I don't expect you to grade students on the idea of on professionalism. What I'm hoping that you do is if you encounter students with significant professionalism issues, move it up the chain. Generally speaking, that is above and the R1 pay grade to address. So that's something that you want to push up to at least your senior and probably your chief resident or the site director if you have serious concerns about this, because professionalism is something that's hard to remediate. So I would encourage you to engage those of us who do this for a living ASAP. So the core elements of how we would like you to grade students is as reporters, interpreters, and managers, and these are additive skills. So what we expect for a passing grade in medicine is a student who can go in, do a history and physical, come out and tell you what they found. And so we want people who can do, clear, legit history physical, reasonably comprehensive, although they may not have, for passing students, they may not have like the greatest knowledge base, so they may not know the exact detailed question to ask, but they would probably err on the side of being comprehensive. And we want them to be able to do a competent oral case presentation. As you all know, it's harder to do an oral case presentation if you don't know what's going on. So we don't want they don't have to do a superb, perfect oral case presentation, but we want them to be able to convey enough information so that you can help them. So that's a reporter. An interpreter is someone who at least can begin to process that information and tell you what they think is going on. So we want someone who fairly consistently is able to generate a pretty good differential, probably at least more than half the time is able to weight that and point out what they think is most likely. So, you know, not necessarily 100% of the time, especially if you're dealing with sick or complicated patients, but most of the time they can give you a pretty good sense of what they think is going on, and they're pretty close to on target. Again, adjusting a little bit for student expertise. A manager does the next step, and this is the honors level student, where they are great at oral case presentations, great at data gathering, develop a good differential diagnosis, and can put together a meaningful management plan. Now that management plan might be, here is how I am going to find out the next thing to do, whether it's calling consults, whether it's ordering tests. It's not necessarily always the definitive therapeutic plan, because we don't always have a definitive therapeutic plan. It is they are able to put together the next steps in the patient care and ideally move that forward as much as possible. Questions about that so far? Go to the chat or just speak up if you want.
I have a question. Is this just when they're doing their presentation that they, you know, talk about this? Because I feel like, you know, if they're talking to you about it first before, or the senior, and they're kind of trying to formulate their plan for the presentation, and maybe they don't have one and you give them suggestions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is great. So this is a great question. You as residents actually have insight into this that we as attendings frequently do not. So we do focus on the oral case presentation as kind of a good opportunity to assess the student's reasoning. I think that in general, for students who are going to get honors, they should have some sense before they bring, you know, they should have some sense of what's going on and what their plan is before they bring it to you. That doesn't mean that you can't polish them up so they look awesome. But you know, if the entirety of what the student is presenting on post-call rounds was taken directly from the resident, that might be a student that I as the attending would give honors because they look so good and you guys have made them look so good. But I actually would prefer that you, the residents who actually know what's happening behind the scenes, were giving them, you know, pass or high pass depending on how they were performing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And at most of our big teaching sites, Harborview, the VA, Harborview, the U, and the VA, we actually will meet with you, we being the site directors, we'll meet with you and kind of go through people's different perspectives on a student performance to make sure that before we put in final grades, we actually have a chance to talk about all this stuff. Laura, or whoever is driving Laura's comments right now, you have a question, go for it.
Hey, yeah, so this is a new grading system for me, and I was just wondering if is there any element of like comparative performance here, or should we be looking at every single student as like their own entity and like theoretically everyone could get honors or theoretically everyone is passing, or should we really, comparative or just isolated incidents?
Super excellent question. I was actually just giving a talk to the ClinEd residents about this yesterday. The answer to your question is we do not want you to be doing comparative performance. We want you to call it as you see it. I can tell you that in the, oh dear, it's been almost 20 years that I've been doing this. It almost always breaks down that between 30 and 50% of the class gets honors, and between 30 and 50% of the class gets high pass, and the balance get pass. And we have never at this institution allocated grades purely on the basis of like, you know, basically a curve that only such and such a threshold should get honors. They do take they actually take 2 final exams in medicine now, and those also impact the final grade a little bit. But from what we want you to do, we want you to call it as you see it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, we feel pretty strongly that in principle, if every student earns an honors grade, then we are willing to give every student an honors grade. And if we have to change the grading system next year, we'll do that. That hasn't happened yet. The other is we really don't want people grading on a comparative basis when we don't know the students that you have been exposed to in the past. So, you know, it may be that the student on your last rotation was a rock star. It may be that you came from med school where everybody's rock stars. We have no idea what your experience is. So we don't want you as residents, or even honestly as faculty, to be doing, this is the best student I've ever seen and therefore they get honors. I mean, you're probably going to give them honors anyway if they're the best student you've ever seen, but I just want you to focus on their performance at the time. Other questions?
I guess my thing, especially with like this moment, which happens a lot, is that I felt like the attending, because they were getting to the point where everybody really wants to talk and be more collaborative. The A&P, I felt like she kind of cut him off and kind of made it so he couldn't even give like a problem representation, couldn't really flesh things out. And then I feel like it kind of removes the opportunity to really demonstrate that they can be a manager or like an enhanced communicator.
Okay, so we'll come back to that, Mac. I'm actually going to give you a second chance to look at the video so you can look at it more closely. You do make a great point in the sense of the more that you are frequently a good teacher in interacting with the student can bring out the student's strengths, and that clearly didn't happen in this video. Partly that is by design in the video, so that you are evaluating the student and not the attending. And partly, if you notice, the thing was shot on VHS. It's a pretty old school video. So this was done back in the day when, you know, we didn't interrupt students. And honestly, I still try not to interrupt students. But yeah, you're entirely correct that you can bring out a student's performance with your teaching skills. And from my point of view, I'm actually okay with grading that student a little bit more highly, although you also have to acknowledge maybe they're not quite at the same performance level as the person who basically leaves you with nothing left to do. Terrence, good question about how you evaluate people. Grading system for where they are in their third year. We find that there's actually pretty minimal variation. It tends to be, it goes up a little bit towards the end of the year, but what's interesting is the difference that we see in grades is actually not in the clinical grades assigned by faculty. Why it seems like grades are going up is because people are getting better at taking the final exams, which makes sense because we use NBME subject exams. So if you've done 5 clerkships, you've done 4 or 5, depending on which clerkships you've done 4 or 5 shelf exams, so you've gotten better at that. Kim, in terms of taking into account their improvement or lack of improvement, what we're looking for is where they are most of the time. So people who have started at one place and improved dramatically, you know, maybe they average out a little bit lower versus the people who stay at a really low place or people who stay at a really high place. But we really want people who are fairly consistent in their skills. Now, some people are going to start, like, for example, you might have at the beginning of the year, first rotation, someone who did a PhD, this is their absolute first clinical experience. This may have already happened. If someone is like way, way behind and catches up really fast, then I don't think, that doesn't mean, to me, that seems like someone who might still be able to get honors if they're kind of starting in that kind of a place. But for people who kind of like, you know, really pound it out and grind it out, and kind of gradually get there, they're probably still more of a high pass student as opposed to the honor student that typically is going to start strong and finish stronger. Any other questions before I push ahead? Okay. I want to tackle E because I promised I would. So we have done, come back to that in a second, Lauren. So what we have done with Enhanced Communicator is, so we've done with E, we changed it from Educator, which we found was incentivizing students bringing in papers and saying that they were teaching. Funny, that came up earlier. And moved that to Enhanced Communicator. And the idea behind Enhanced Communicator is that they are able to communicate the plan to the team. They are able to communicate the plan to the patient. When I think about Enhanced Communicator, partly because I attend at the U, students who kind of meet this Enhanced Communicator bar, which is also part of the honors grade, are actually able to interact with the multiple different people that you have to interact with, you know, nurses, therapists, consultants, all of these folks, the whole interprofessional team that you have to have in order to move care forward in the inpatient setting. So when I'm thinking about an honor student, they are not only able to make the plan, they are able to implement the plan both at the bedside with the patient and on the phone or whatever communication mechanism they're using with all the other folks. So that's kind of where we're going with the Enhanced Communicator piece. So Lauren, your question is interesting and obviously challenging. We are hoping that by using these criteria, we haven't changed the criteria despite the fact that we know that there's bias in the grading system. So We are hoping that the more that we reinforce these criteria for grading with faculty and with residents and with other people who are evaluating students, the more that mitigates the impact of bias. But we don't have I wish I had an answer for how to eliminate bias in clinical grading. I don't. If anyone does, please feel free to chime in. So basically the other thing that we've done is we have actually, the reason why students are taking 2 tests instead of 1 this year is because we know that there's substantial issues with bias in terms of exposure to multiple choice question type tests. And we were concerned that we were getting biased results out of the shelf exam, so we actually added a different type of exam called a key features exam, and that's actually kind of interesting. We don't have enough data yet to know whether or not there's a difference in terms of race, ethnicity, or any of the other stuff that we were looking at for bias. But we do know that the 2 tests seem to be measuring different things in the sense that the Aquifer key features exam does not necessarily always correlate with the NBME score. So we're working on that, but yeah, it's a tough issue without a great answer, because a lot of evaluation in the workplace setting always has an element of subjectivity. There is certainly a push to have as many faculty as possible do things like implicit bias training, but we're talking about literally hundreds of faculty just in Seattle alone, and then if you add the rest of the regional medical school, it's huge. How do clinical exam grades get integrated into the final grade? So the final grade starts with the clinical grade, and then your final grade can move up or move down depending on whether you get above or below the mean on each exam. So people who score above the mean on either exam, their grade moves up a little bit. People who score below the mean on either exam, their grade moves down a little bit. So it's possible that you could do well on one exam and badly on the other, and it nets out 0, or you could do well on both. But the bottom line is, if you have a strong performance on an exam, it bumps your grade up. Yeah, I'm reading John's comments about bias. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yeah. Okay. Other questions or comments before I move on to the last little section? All right, so for the last thing, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to have you watch the very end, coming back to Mac's question, I'm going to have you watch the very end of this video again, and just watch kind of the tail end of his presentation and see what you think about this, and have you kind of reassess where you would grade him. So here we go.
So what do you think is going on?
Sounds like he's bleeding from his GI tract. We got a retic count and it was elevated at 3.7, so that confirms recent blood loss.
And what would be the most likely causes of GI blood loss in this patient?
I'd say hemorrhoids are most likely, but colon cancer is also a possibility.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to rule out as a cause of his new anemia?
No, but we may need to consider other things if his scope is negative.
Okay, well, why don't we talk about an approach to anemia?
Okay, and we will. Here we go. Please grade again. I will stop my sharing. So moving, I see that we're moving a little bit towards pass, and yeah, that's actually what I was hoping would happen. Oh wait, turn my video back on. So forgot to vote. We say high pass. Yeah. So the issue with this student is he came out with an okay differential, but he kind of missed the point of the case, which I remember right, was actually kind of more about angina than it was about anemia. So he is someone who, even though he came up with an appropriate differential for a problem, wasn't really able to focus on the major problem at hand. So I would have given this guy a pass. But high pass is okay. Honors, I would probably tone down a little bit. So anyways, interesting doing this by Zoom. Wasn't quite what I expected, but I think it worked out okay. Other questions, because we are at 12, so I want to let you guys go. I did not finish early as I promised, but I am happy to answer other questions in terms of grading. Mac, for some reason you just appeared on my screen, but you're still muted, so I don't know what the deal is.
I just turned the camera back on.
I'm hearing no questions. Laura Samples et al. Asking whether or not comments affect grades at all. Comments generally don't. The exception to that is if someone puts in a clinical grade that is widely discordant with their comments. When we are compiling their final grade, will actually sometimes reach out and say, hey, you know, you said more often we're doing it because they said pass and described an honors student, but occasionally if they're like, this person is really struggling honors, we will check in with them and be like, is that really the grade that you thought was correct? But we do not grade on the basis of comments. We actually are looking at collecting data on doing that. It's probably just in terms of the volume of work that it would be on a quarterly basis and the number of people we have to do it, it is probably unlikely that we're going to be doing that anytime soon. But we are thinking if there was a paper published a year or two ago, I think, in JGIM, kind of looking at natural language processing and what you see in terms of student comments that was very interesting. Tech's probably not there yet.
Would you prefer that, because I know that there are certain programs that actually can like suss out bias, whether it's like directed towards like men versus women or any other genders. Do you ever provide resources for us to like put our comments in for us to like realize the type of language we're using, whether or not it's leaning one way or the other, or do you guys handle that like on the back end or?
Oh, that's a great question. So to the subject of gender bias is challenging because there's actually a large body of literature showing that in general, women get better clinical grades in medical school than men. There is also a smaller body of literature showing that in some contexts, women appear to be better doctors than men. So how you manage the bias in the final grade is actually kind of challenging. In terms of what I think you're asking about, Mac, which is like the lovely performance by an apparently female person or the strong athletic performance by a male person. We do not manage that directly, but we do. So what we do is we take your comments and then we compile a final comment that we put in for the dean's letter. So yes, we do a lot of editing on that, and we are very aware of what we're putting in when we're putting in that stuff for the dean's letter or for the department letter. But if students come in and ask for their unedited, unredacted comments, they get them, and that stuff will be in there. But so at the kind of site director and people who are writing final evaluations level, we are definitely paying very close attention to the adjectives that we are using for that. Where we are trying to do faculty development because we don't have as much control over it is actually in people's personal letters of recommendation. So John and I have both done workshops on this subject in terms of the comments that you write in letters for both based on gender and based on race. And yeah, John, and yeah, yeah, John is right. From the point of view of what you're writing as residents, we will protect people from you if you were like way out in left field on this stuff. But as you are becoming faculty, it's definitely worth thinking about.
I think that we have an issue with having trouble getting evaluations back, period. And so I think that just completing them in a timely way is really what we want you to focus on, rather than the subtleties about this word or that word, probably.
Yeah, and honestly, one thing that I will share from my own experience, as well as that of many residents and many faculty, is the perfect is definitely the enemy of the good. please do not hang on to an evaluation waiting to write the absolutely lovely, 100 words about someone. Put in 1 or 2 things for them to work on, put in 1 or 2 things they're doing well, and send it in, because otherwise they get squat. So if the only place their evaluation exists is in your head, they're never going to get it, and it's never going to impact their grade. Other comments? Other thoughts? Okay, thank you all. Thanks everybody. It's been fun. Feel free to email me if you have more questions, because I am here, or if you are at one of the clinical sites, ping your site director. They do this day in and day out. And I will see all you guys on the interwebs.